Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
No problem. How you going today?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good.
Good.
Um, I guess we can start if you're ready to start.
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
I feel like, first of all, as a Melbourne resident, I have to ask, why was it a Sydney only show?
Uh, well, logistics is the easy answer. So we have been working full bore for the last year where possible on a new record. And when it came time to decide how many shows we were going to play for this, we had to be pretty particular about the choices we made so that we, one, didn't uh, cut into the time we have to make a new record, given that we all live in different places. So time together is pretty sparse. So we had to pick 5 cities, which was fucking hard because
Yeah.
there are so many places that mean a lot to us. And it was hard to not play 4 shows in Australia, honestly. We have such a strong connection to the city of Brisbane. It's the first place we played, the first people we met, the first friends we made, people we still keep in touch with. Um, it's hard to not make the trip to Perth to Western Australia to play because same deal. We just have a lot of strong connections there, and Melbourne is the place where we've played the biggest show to date in our history as a band, at least as a headliner. So it wasn't easy leaving any of those places on the cutting room floor. Ultimately, we decided to record in Australia um, at the end of the year, and the studio's pretty close to Sydney. So we opted to fly into Sydney and play a show rather than flying into Melbourne or somewhere else and then having to fly to Sydney. So um, sort of just crossed our fingers and hoped that people would make the trip from elsewhere in Oz. So it was not an easy decision to make. I think that we all kind of felt like we should do at least both Sydney and Melbourne, but ended up having to make some tough calls.
Yeah, that's fair. So you're doing some recording after your tour. What
Yep.
can fans expect from your upcoming project?
My goodness, how do I answer this question? So I think in spending the last few years post COVID, returning, not post COVID, but post the industry shutting down as a result of the pandemic, and going into revisiting 2 records from many years ago that have meant a lot to us. I think it gave us the opportunity to really like think about what about those 2 records we loved and what worked as far as the creative process went. And I think we've internalized a lot of lessons from that sort of exploration. So I think you'll see a little bit of both of those records on the new one, um, and a little bit of the previous one, Panorama, as well. We're kind of, I think, finding what we love the most about all 3 of those records and trying to approach the songs on this one with that in mind. I think you can expect some heavier music, some darker music, some faster music. I think you can expect a lot of um, experimentation, not just musically, but production wise. I think we're pretty intent on kind of allowing ourselves to indulge every impulse and to not limit ourselves entirely to what has and has not worked so much as just taking every idea we've ever had and seeing what feels right now in the present era. So I think you can expect a lot of different things. It's a terrible answer, but I don't know how to
You
narrow
know?
it down into something less vague. But definitely will be, I think, a bleak record. I think it will be um, a pretty moody record. I think there's a lot of uh, internal struggle and
Mhm.
and also outward communal struggle represent. So it's been pretty difficult to not absorb the state of the universe, and I think that'll show in the content on the record.
Yeah. What what feelings come up for you as you like replay through such iconic eras? Like obviously you've just done a tour in 2022 and 2023, and now you're doing another like anniversary tour. Do you feel like the music ages with you, or do you ever like get transported back to the person that you were when you wrote those songs?
Yeah, both. Um, you know, playing music, when you record something, you take a snapshot of a period of time in your life. And over the years playing those songs, I think you put some distance, both literally and figuratively, between you and the initial impetus to write them. And then coming back specifically to celebrate or remember um, those eras, you do a bit more thinking about what they mean to you, and it's an interesting thing because I think in some ways I expected to be struck by how little I relate to them at a different era in my life, and I've had the opposite experience where I like really find what I connect to still that might mean something in a new context now. Rooms of the House specifically, I feel like I maybe understand the record better than I did 10 years ago writing the lyrics. I think that was in some ways a little bit prescient accidentally. I think because it was written as a work of mostly fiction, because I was like trying to put myself in the headspace of somebody who experienced a particular thing. I uh, I like had to look into the future of my life, and then having 10 years between and experienced some of those interpersonal traumas and conflicts, I think the record kind of feels more relevant to me than
Yeah,
it did 10 years ago, which is not something I expected, but has been an interesting little journey.
a nice surprise, like a little time capsule, if you will.
Yeah, totally.
Um, Obviously, yeah, there's a lot like going on in the world, like you said, there's a lot to kind of navigate the darker, heavier themes. I'm curious to get your thoughts on, I know like post-hardcore, emo, whatever kind of genre you want to say has brought a sense of like community and understanding of people's negative emotions and like a sense of camaraderie. Do you ever feel any pressure to be like a spokesperson for mental health or to craft perfect spaces for other people?
I think you feel pressure to do so because you uh, have the privilege of visibility. Because I think that you do feel a degree of responsibility for, at least like on a practical, on the ground level, making certain that people are able to be who they are and experience what they experience. And there's like an acute awareness that comes with that because you understand that people might value what you have to say more than they ought to, given that the only difference really between me and anyone else is that I have a mouthpiece from which to speak. So um, there is a degree to which I think about that, particularly in having conversations with people after shows about why they relate to one thing or to another thing. But ultimately, I think on a creative level, centering that too directly does a disservice to the creation of the art itself and to the art itself. And I think that I I'm aware and I value that position, but I also have to put some distance between myself and it when it comes time to actually write about what I'm feeling or what I suspect other people in my life are feeling or what I suspect that everybody everywhere is feeling. So um, I do consider it, but I try to compartmentalize as much as I can to not you know
Yeah.
alter the end of the process.
What role does music play in your sense of like community and sense of self?
I mean, I think that I learned community in a lot of ways from what I found in punk rock and the surrounding subculture. I think that like it's pretty difficult for me to experience it as anything other than an extension of a greater community. I do think that the beauty of music as an art form is that it is not a solitary experience, even when it is, because there's the underlying awareness that other people are doing the same. And generally speaking, I think those who are attracted to whatever, punk rock, whatever you want to call it, are attracted to it because it carries a sense of community, of a greater struggle against the violence of life and the feeling of isolation. So I think it plays an immensely important role in a lot of people's lives, and mine included, all of ours, obviously, or I wouldn't we wouldn't still be playing
Do it.
shows,
Yeah.
approaching 40. But yeah, I think that it's the best part about being involved in music is having a larger extended family.
Yeah. Um, so you've mentioned punk rock. I'm curious, as someone who grew up in Seattle, obviously I felt like grunge's chokehold my entire life. Growing up in Michigan, are there any like artists or bands or sounds that transport you back to growing up there?
You grew up in Seattle.
Yeah.
I'm in Seattle right now. I live in Seattle.
Do
My
you? Where in
parents.
Seattle do you live?
I live in Ballard.
Oh, nice. Yeah, my dad lived
Yeah.
in Queen Anne, but I grew up in West
Oh,
Seattle.
right on.
Yeah.
Okay. No shit. I got friends in both Queen Anne and West Seattle.
Nice. How is
Cool.
it?
Well, what's that?
How is it? I miss it.
It's good. It's good. Yeah. It's
Nice.
you know it's good.
Yeah,
Mostly still seeing the sky right now. So
that's huge.
thank,
Yeah.
thankful for that. But yeah. Anyway, Michigan.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, bands in Michigan. So some bands in Michigan that were really important to me when I was younger. There's a band from uh, the east side of the state, from closer to Detroit, called Bear vs. Shark that I spent a lot of time seeing at a tiny arts cooperative in Grand Rapids for not very many people. Um, and I maintain that they're one of the more underrated bands in our kind of subgenre of punk rock. Um, there is a band called Small Brown Bike that I really connected to deeply, that I think people in Michigan connect to in a particular way. It's just like very, I don't know, Michigan coded. It makes you feel like you're in a snowy forest landscape, and
Mhm.
drinking beer and under a bridge or whatever. And that's just like something that I still, when I listen to it, I feel like I'm screaming along to the words in the kitchen of my first apartment with my friends at 18. So there's a lot that takes me back. A lot of the bands that we grew up playing with um, weren't bands that ever, made it into the greater touring universe. So there's a whole bunch of other bands that played a pretty important role in
Yeah,
us not just falling in love with music, but deciding to keep doing it in adulthood. So
it's huge. I feel like, yeah, I mean, obviously important to remember that a lot of people that I'm sure you played with and formed community with are not still around and also probably didn't have, yeah, the opportunity to like become a little bit bigger. On that note, what is
yeah,
the secret to La Dispute's longevity?
I mean, our longevity, I think that the secret to our longevity is our love for each other. Honestly, it sounds deeply corny, but it's still my four best friends and people that I've been through everything under the sun alongside with, that still matter immensely to me, and that also I think understand me in a way that most of the people in my life can't, because they live that life alongside. And I think that, and just the fact that we love doing it, we love, we've always made a point of centering the creative process and the communal aspect of playing music with friends and being on stage in a room full of people who connect to the same things that inspired us to make the music in the first place. So yeah, I don't know. The fact that people give a shit, the fact that we still love making music and playing it, and the fact that we all still get along.
That's huge. Um, Sounds like a pretty good cocktail to me.
Yeah,
If you weren't a musician, what would you be doing?
I think I would be writing.
Yeah.
I say that, I mean, had I not spent the last almost 20 years working on this particular craft, I think maybe I would have uh, spent it on another similar one, just written without music behind it,
Yeah.
or I'd be working in a used bookstore. I don't know. I love to be around books, so I suspect that's probably the path I would have chosen.
Yeah. So when you're not making music, what are you doing? I'm assuming reading, if you want to be a writer. Yeah.
Yeah, I read a lot. Spend a lot of time with my partner and with friends. I do a lot of laundry. I wash a lot of dishes.
Hmm.
I work part time, so
I love that. Even your
I stay
hardcore experience
occupied.
had
Yeah.
to stick. Um, what's the songwriting process like for you? Actually, if you would have been a writer, would it have been a novel writer or like a poetry writer? What would you have written, or just
I
anything?
mean, I write much more poetry than anything. I think that I would like to write in a longer format. I
Mhm.
think I have not crafted that discipline yet, learned that discipline yet. So at some point, I think that I would like to try to write fiction.
Hmm.
But I hesitate to say that I would be writing novels, even if I'd spent the last 20 years trying to figure it out, because I'm not sure that I've ever figured out how to really push myself towards something that doesn't also have four other people moving in the same direction or depending on me to move in that direction. So, yeah.
Um, yeah, what's the songwriting process like for you before we wrap
Yeah.
up?
Um, I mean, I zero in pretty early on to stories that feel like they contain a truth or at the very least powerful conflict. And I think in fixating on stories like that, I notice consistencies in through lines, and I'm able to identify themes that feel worth approaching. And yeah, so from that point, usually I send those ideas to my bandmates, and we build from there, whether it be from a story or from just like a specific feeling I want to capture. And then the
Yeah.
talented musicians in the group will build pieces, and then we'll work that way.
Yeah, so it's quite collaborative as
Yeah.
a yeah. Um, what um what are you like listening to, watching, and reading at the moment?
I'm currently reading entirely too many books. I'm reading a book called Suicide by Edouard Levé. I'm reading a book called Left Hand by Paul Curran, and I am reading a book of short stories called Poachers by a writer named Tom Franklin. I'm like been really interested in sort of metafiction, literary fiction.
Okay.
The same goes for my film viewing habits, which is the other thing that I generally lean on and have leaned on pretty heavily for this process. So I've been watching a lot of um, experimental film, which sounds about as pretentious as it is,
Hmm.
and also the films of Paul Schrader, who I love and who's from the same place as us, from the same hometown. So it has a lot of shared experiences, which has been fun to kind of see um, how those shared experiences have affected us similarly, and to be able to look at somebody who's been doing it for longer and better than I have has been pretty illuminating. So
Yeah. Um, Great. And then yeah, my last question for you is just do you have any like major first memories of music? So or like any moment where you knew that music was more than just like something that you enjoyed and was kind of like a bigger
yeah,
purpose for you.
my dad played guitar in the house growing up. and had his records in the living room in the entertainment center, and listening to my dad play songs by Neil Young, and then finding the records was like I think the earliest that I felt connected to music as an art form in a way that felt you know a little bit bigger than myself. Um,
Mhm.
so listening to my dad play songs on guitar was like a big thing for me.
Nice. And Neil Young in particular, that's a great choice.
Yeah, Neil Young. Neil Young was just like one of my dad's favorites, and that was the one that I remember really made sense to me in a way that some of the other stuff that he played didn't. But that one really clicked for me and still does.
Have you read Waging Heavy Peace?
I have not.
You should. It's long, but
Uh,
it's good.
okay, I'll add it to the list.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you like Neil Young, that's my only
and I
suggestion.
do. So yeah, that's great. I
Yeah.
love that. Thank you.
No worries. Well, I think that's us at time. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. I really
Of
appreciate it.
course. Thank you
And
so
I'll
much.
see
I had a
you in
great time.
Sydney.
Sounds great. Can't wait. Say hi if you see me.
I will. I will. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Yep.
Bye.
Take care.